Now I find this a bit odd, and I just want you to have a look for yourself. This strange tic that Mohammed bin Salman has, and it reminds me a lot like when King Abdullah of Jordan visited Trump and kept on blinking. Why are they so nervous around Trump? I understand people can have physiological issues that causes tics and facial, twitches. But I also know that when people are nervous, they're scared or worried, then facial tics become even more pronounced, even if they have some sort of physiological problem that causes it in the first place. So inshallah, in this video, amongst other things, I hope it becomes clear as to why Arab and Muslim rulers seem to be in such fear when it comes to meeting Trump. So what's happened? Mohammed bin Salman, the effective ruler of Saudi Arabia, was summoned for an official visit by, Emperor Trump. And like all good loyal subjects, MBFs came bearing gifts. But really, who's really benefiting from this tribute? There's a lot of questions, but let's just go through some of the clips together.
Much everybody, we have a extremely respected man in the Oval Office today, and a friend of mine for a long time, a very good friend of mine. And I'm very proud of the job he's done. What he's done is incredible in terms of human rights and everything else.
What you're doing, Mr. President, is really creating a lot of good things and good foundation to create more economical growth, more business in America. And it will also, your work for the world peace. I believe, Mr. President, today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas, investment opportunity.
So you are doing that now. You're saying to me now that the 600 billion will be 1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that, and we
I like that
will
very
do
much.
Go ahead.
He works hard.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. That's great.
We know only recently, maybe just a few months ago, that Trump visited the Middle East, traveled to Saudi, UAE and Qatar, amongst other places. And while there, the rulers were just throwing out money and gifts to Trump. Qatar gifted him with a $400 million plane, as well as promising to invest $1 trillion. UAE and Saudi followed suit with hundreds of billions of dollars of investment. It looked like they were giving tribute to their king or emperor. The optics, to be quite frank, were bad, were terrible. But now, with Mohammed bin Salman saying, no, I'll give $1 trillion now, it just looks even worse. And you know what? $1 trillion, that's just crazy amounts of money. I just want you to think, why are Arab oil and gas rich countries throwing that amount of money building their American economy? It staggers belief the sums of money being invested in America, not just from Saudi Arabia, but from other Gulf countries too. I actually once asked ChatGPT how long would it take to count to 1 trillion, and it said something like 32,000 years of non-stop counting. The point is, and it's not just Saudi, it's other Gulf countries too, giving hundreds of billions of dollars or even $1 trillion. That's just crazy. That is unimaginable wealth, unimaginable ability to even count that amount of money. For instance, why not, invest that amount of wealth in the Muslim world? Build all your own chips, create chip factories, AI technology, computing, a space program, or help eradicate poverty throughout the Muslim world. Why use the wealth of this ummah, wealth that ultimately was granted and gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and use it for America, use it to help American state, a state that uses those funds that are invested by Arab and Muslim countries to actually help fund Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people? And that's the point, isn't it? Why are Muslim countries investing in America, helping their industries, helping their economy, when the same country, America, has gifted free of charge the very bombs and bullets that have been used to murder families in Gaza? It's like I'm living in an alternative reality here. Am I like speaking some crazy stuff here to think that this isn't right? It's not morally right. It just sounds utterly repugnant, especially when that money could have been used to eradicate poverty throughout the Muslim world, in fact, throughout the world itself. You could invest that wealth into your own native AI technology, as I mentioned, build your own space program, build your own manufacturing base, build highly effective and modern military, raise standard of living amongst the ummah, not just in the Gulf states, but across the Muslim world. Now, some will say, but this is Saudi obtaining state-of-the-art military technology from America like the F-35s. Here's what was said about that.
Question question about the F-35s that are being sold to Saudi Arabia. Are these the same ones that are being used by the Israeli military? And if so, how does that allow for the qualitative military edge for Israel?
When you look at the F-35 and you're asking me, is it the same? I think it's going to be pretty similar, yeah. You know,
How will that
this
affect-
is a great ally, and Israel's a great ally. And I know they'd like you to get planes of reduced caliber. I don't think that makes you too happy. They've been a great ally. Israel's been a great ally. And we're looking at that exactly right now. But as far as I'm concerned, I think they are both at a level where they should get top of the line. Yes.
Now, it seems to me that Trump said that he won't actually give him the very latest technology because that's reserved for Israel. But even if it were, we know clearly from the actual agreement that America retains the right to dictate how its military technology can be used by countries that bought them. The only country that doesn't actually need permission on how and who to target is in fact Israel. But for Saudi or any other Muslim country, buying military equipment from America comes with strings attached. For instance, for Saudi, to move their F-35s, they would need permission from America. You know, it sounds crazy, but even just simply to move them from one location in Saudi to another location in Saudi requires US permission. Similarly, Saudi are not allowed to maintain these assets, these military equipment. Only American companies can. That's because they prevent any country from actually seeing the tech inside these aircrafts. And furthermore, America has kill switches on any of these military equipments. You're buying military equipment that doesn't allow you permission to use them unless it's in America's interest. That's in essence what's occurring. Unless America in essence allows it. That's why I'm saying rather than investing trillions in American tech and buying their military equipment, the Muslim world with their trillions of dollars should be at the very least developing their own industries that develops the military technology. You know, that's comparable, if not better than what we see in the West. It's the only way to effectively defend this ummah and to prevent genocides like that taking place in Gaza. But we know that this really isn't going to happen with the current set of rulers that we have in the Muslim world. That's because they are so desperate to get in bed with Israel, to secure its interests with Israel, and to be protected by America.
Have you reached an agreement on a U.S.-Saudi defense treaty today? And are you going to bring up the Abraham Accords in your discussion?
I already brought them up.
What did you say?
I think I got a positive response. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, so
put you on the spot.
yeah, so definitely we believe having a good relation with all Middle Eastern countries is a good thing. And we want to be part of the Ibrahim Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that happen.
I think we're, you know, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. You know, we talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region. And we will do our best to reach that day.
I said it over a year ago now that Saudi normalization with Israel is not a question of if it would happen, but when it would happen. The fact is, if there wasn't a genocide conducted by Israel in Gaza, then Saudi would have already signed the Abraham Accords. And this is the reason why Saudi backs the current Gaza ceasefire plan, the one that was ratified or had a resolution passed by the United Nations Security Council. And, you know, suddenly the United Nations becomes important again. The resolution that was passed was effectively to send in an international force to work with Israel to disarm the Palestinians. I need you to really concentrate on this point. Whether it's Turkish forces or Saudi or Pakistan being sent into Gaza, they'll be working with Israel to disarm the Palestinians, stop them from having weapons to resist the occupation by the Zionist entity. What it means is that people who have signed this agreement or backed this plan have effectively agreed, and what they want is to see the Palestinians surrender, give up their right to resist, a right established, by the way, by international law. That is the right to resist occupation, including through armed resistance to occupation. So by forcing the Palestinians, and it's not just Hamas, but Palestinians as a whole, to disarm. They're expecting the Palestinians to simply give up and accept occupation and subjugation, to surrender. What Saudi is doing is basically wanting this to occur, because what they want is not peace, but quiet. They know that if Palestinians resist, then this causes them problems. It causes them problems amongst their own population that is boiling and actually wants to see something from their own rulers to protect the lives of Palestinians. You know, I reported this a year ago when I highlighted that Saudi Crown Prince said that he would face possible assassination in his attempts to normalize with Israel due to the genocide that is being conducted against Muslims. He said this because he wanted protection from America in order to help him normalize with Israel. So Mohammed bin Salman is clear. He wants it to be quiet in Palestine. He wants them to accept being subjugated and ultimately face the policies that will drive them out of Palestine, while Israel increases settler colonial program and, colonies throughout the West Bank and even now into Gaza. It's not peace he's after. Abraham Accords is not about peace. It's about recognizing Israel's right to exist as an ethno-racial state that took over Muslim land through ethnic cleansing. That's why it's a betrayal. This whole Abraham Accords and signing it is a betrayal to the Ummah and giving up Masjid al-Aqsa, accepting the right of an apartheid state that just killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Even the point about the credible pathway to a two-state solution, remember here, there's no claim that only if there's a Palestinian state that Saudi would normalize, but it's about a credible pathway. But even if it was about accepting a Palestinian state, that's still a betrayal. But that isn't even on the question. That's not on the cards. It's about the pathway to a two-state solution. Again, this is just about kicking the can down the road, making it quiet, get off the front pages so that then they can normalize, while also claiming that, we're only doing this to help the Palestinians get their own state. And even then, what did Trump say? Basically, no. It's not a two-state solution that he's looking for. He said very explicitly, there's no commitment from America.
And we want to be part of the Ibrahim Accord, but we want also to be sure that we secure a clear path of two-state solution. And today we have a healthy discussion with Mr. President that we're going to work on that to be sure that we can prepare the right situation as soon as possible to have that.
I think we're, I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state. We talked about a lot of things in a short period of time. We'll be discussing it further too. But I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want
The point is, it's a lie. There's no two-state solution. And Saudi is only saying that as a way to pacify its own population and the Muslim world at large. Saudi doesn't care about a two-state solution. They don't care about the Palestinians. What he cares about, what Mohammed bin Salman cares about, is his throne and how to protect it. And if it means giving trillions to America and recognizing Israel, so be it. And maybe also it will help him to bring in bikini beaches and Christmas and Halloween parties. And anyone who criticizes his policies of bringing in music concerts, free mixing parties, boxing, WWE, etc., they're locked up, possibly facing torture and even execution. In fact, one journalist, to her credit, actually brought up the issue of Jamal Khashoggi.
And Your Royal Highness, the U.S. intelligence concluded that you orchestrated the brutal murder of a journalist. 9/11 families are furious that you are here in the Oval Office. Why should Americans trust you? And the same to you, Mr. President.
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business. As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
And Trump didn't like the question, did he? Claiming that it's insulting to ask this question to a world leader, supposedly a guest of the White House, by bringing up the fact that he murdered or he ordered a murder of a political opponent, a political dissident. Yeah, look, I agree about the point about 9/11 was a bit of an irrelevant side point. But anyways, just look at the answer that Mohammed bin Salman gave. And also, just a quick side note, look at the nervous tick that also comes in when he starts answering this question.
And we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Just you ask, Mr. President, you allow me to answer. I feel painful about, the families of 9/11. About the journalists, it's really painful to hear, anyone that been losing his life for, no real purpose or not in a legal way. And it's been painful for us in Saudi Arabia. We've did all the right steps of investigation, etc. in Saudi Arabia, and we've improved our system to be sure that nothing happened like that. And it's painful and it's a huge mistake, and we are doing our best that this doesn't happen again.
But just on this Jamal Khashoggi point, some people might not realize, and if you don't know, let me just explain who he is and what happened. He was a political dissident. He was a Saudi political dissident, critical of Mohammed bin Salman. He wrote, for a number of papers, including the Washington Post, and he lived in Turkey because he couldn't return back to Saudi. In 2018, Saudi sent out a death squad to Turkey. 2 of those members from that death squad were known to be close to Mohammed bin Salman, part of his supposed inner circle, apparently. And at this Saudi embassy in Turkey, Jamal Khashoggi was there trying to obtain marriage documents with his wife/fiance who was waiting outside the embassy. Then this team of Saudi killers basically murdered him in the Saudi embassy. They put a bag over his head, suffocated him, then cut up his body into pieces. By the way, the room where he was murdered and dismembered had actually been wrapped in plastic to prevent the blood from leaking out. His body parts were then wrapped up in plastic and dumped somewhere. They then had a person dress up as, Khashoggi, pretending that he had left the embassy. They didn't actually know at the time that his wife/fiance was actually outside. And then they attempted to give the impression that his murder, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, actually occurred outside the embassy amongst maybe some Turks. And how do we know about the details of this? Because Turkish intelligence had actually bugged the room where his murder took place. And if you watch the documentary The Dissident, you can actually hear the recordings of the murder taking place and the conversation they were having with him, and even afterwards while they're cutting up his body into parts. And this hit was pretty much well known to have occurred based on the orders of Mohammed bin Salman. And like I said, this is the state of the Muslim rulers today and how they treat political opponents or political dissidents. It's not about necessarily agreeing everything what Jamal Khashoggi said, but it's about the lengths that these rulers go to assassinate and murder and kill and dismember and cut up bodies of people that speak out and criticize their regime. Anyways, talking about Khashoggi is like a documentary in itself, and there are documentaries that have been produced about it. So if you want, you can go and look at this. But just going back to the actual meeting taking place, why is Mohammed bin Salman nervous, with all the tics that we can see, the facial tics that we can see? Well, this is best summed up by Harold Ickes, who is the United States Secretary of the Interior and who stated this after World War II. This is what he said. Middle East is a huge world galaxy of oil fields that has no parallel in the world. Saudi Arabia is the sun of this galaxy, for it is the biggest of the well in Middle East. Its conditions are suitable, for its king Abdulaziz Al Saud wants 2 things, money and protection of the throne. A USA must guarantee these 2 things. So paying trillions to America, signing the Abraham Accord is fundamentally about that. Fundamentally about protecting the Saudi royal family's throne. It's not about securing the interests of Islam, helping the Ummah, protecting the lives of the oppressed, or protecting the Palestinians. His nerves is because he knows that he's actually going to a person who's there to protect his throne, because he sees that his throne is secured by America and the West. And protect from whom? From the Ummah, including from his own population too. It's very similar to Israel in the fact that Israel doesn't exist or can't exist without American support, American protection. And similarly, Saudi, Egypt, Jordan, and other countries are all born from the same womb. They're ultimately products of Western colonization. Not only did they create these nation states, but they also created the leadership in the Muslim world too. And why did they do that? Very clearly, because it served their interest, and they wanted these pliant rulers to serve the interest of the West. And if they depart from Western agenda, or specifically American agenda, that's when the jackals come in. In other words, regime change. Look, America isn't an all-powerful, state or country where the Ummah can't enact change. America wants Saudi to normalize with Israel to withdraw American troops from the region. That's because it's facing a $38 trillion debt crisis, a cost of living crisis. They can no longer afford their military footprint in the Muslim world. That's why they want countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, UAE to become more in terms of protecting the security of the region on behalf of America, to protect American, Western, and ultimately Israeli interests in the region. And that shows the weakness of America. But it also shows us the fact that the opportunities for the Ummah to break free of Western hegemony and American hegemony within the region is there. We have the wealth, we have the Ummah in terms of the size and the population, but we have these slavish rulers who are willing to kill and dismember political dissidents rather than invest their wealth in the Ummah itself to protect against genocide that's taken place and inflicted against the Palestinians. Look, without being politically literate, we'll end up ignorant of the real games that are being played, thinking Saudi and its leadership have some sort of interest or, playing 4D chess, or they're there to help secure the interest of the Ummah. That is just simply untrue. They're not there to help the Ummah. They're there to serve Western and also Zionist interests within the region. We need to be aware of this, because until we're not aware of the problem, we can't work to achieve a solution.